They have more money than most governments, and yet you will never see their names on a stadium. Ask yourself why. There is a family in Europe that has controlled more land than some countries for over 400 years. They have never owned a football club. They have never needed to.
While Roman Abramovich was splashing billions on Chelsea and making back-page headlines every weekend, this family was quietly collecting rent from half a continent. One of them once said something that should stop you in your tracks. He said, "The moment the public knows your name, you have already lost."
Let that sink in for a second. We live in a world where billionaires buy football clubs to become famous, where tech moguls purchase sports franchises like trophies, where new money announces itself with floodlights, transfer fees, and press conferences.
But the people who have held wealth for generations, the families whose fortunes survived wars, revolutions, and economic collapses, they never played that game. Not once. And when you understand why, you will never look at wealth the same way again. New money has a hunger that old money lost centuries ago.
It is the hunger for recognition. When someone builds a fortune in a single generation, there is an invisible pressure to prove it is real, to show the world that the success actually happened. A football club does that perfectly. Suddenly, your name is on 60,000 jerseys. Journalists write about you every week. You sit in a glass box above the pitch, and the cameras find your face. You exist in the public imagination. For someone who spent 20 years being unknown while building a business empire, that feeling is intoxicating. But old money never needed that feeling. Because old money never forgot what attention actually costs. Think about what owning a football club really means. You are purchasing a business that loses money more often than it makes it. The world's biggest clubs, Manchester United, Barcelona, Juventus, have all operated at significant losses for extended periods. You are paying hundreds of millions of pounds for the privilege of being questioned by fans every single week. Every transfer window, every tactical decision, every result becomes a public referendum on your judgment. If you get it wrong, and you will get it wrong, millions of people will hate you out loud on the internet. Old money looked at that equation and walked away before it was even an option. There is a concept that wealthy dynasties have understood for centuries that most people never learn. It is called controlled obscurity. The idea is simple. The less the public knows about your assets, your movements, and your decisions, the less surface area you have for attack. Governments cannot tax what they cannot see. Competitors cannot copy what they do not know exists. Enemies cannot threaten what they cannot locate. Old money built invisible fortresses out of privacy, and they have been living inside them ever since. A football club is the opposite of an invisible fortress. It is a spotlight pointed directly at your balance sheet. When you own a club, your financial decisions become public. Your wage structures get leaked. Your transfer fees are reported. Your debts are visible in annual accounts that journalists pick apart every year. You cannot hide inside a football club. And for families who have protected generational wealth precisely by staying hidden, that level of exposure is not just uncomfortable, it is existentially dangerous. But here is where it gets even deeper. Old money does not just avoid football clubs because of the exposure. They avoid them because of what they reveal about the buyer. In the circles where generational wealth moves, buying a football club for status is considered almost embarrassing. It signals that you need external validation, that you have not yet made peace with what you have. It is the financial equivalent of wearing a suit with the designer logo on the outside. The people who know, they notice, and they judge, quietly. The Rothschilds did not buy Arsenal. The Rockefellers did not bid for the New York Giants. The old aristocratic families of England did not rescue Premier League clubs when they went into administration. These people had more than enough money to do it. They simply understood something that Roman Abramovich, Todd Boehly, and the Abu Dhabi royal family either did not know or did not care about. Fame and wealth are not the same thing. In fact, for wealth that wants to survive, fame is often the enemy. Consider how old money actually deploys capital. Land is the foundation. It appreciates quietly, generates income silently, and almost never makes the news, unless you want it to. Private equity allows you to own stakes in businesses without your name appearing anywhere near the front door. Art collections hold value across centuries and sit in temperature-controlled rooms where nobody can see them unless you invite them in. Trusts and foundations distribute money in ways that are legally structured to minimize both tax exposure and public attention. Every single one of these vehicles shares the same characteristic. They work better in the dark. Football works in the light. That is literally its design. The entire business model depends on public attention. Without fans and seats and millions of eyeballs on screens, there is no revenue. Without revenue, there is no club. Football needs to be seen to survive. Old money built its entire strategy around not being seen. The philosophies are incompatible at the most fundamental level. Now, think about the families who did buy football clubs and watch what happened to them. Abramovich built Chelsea into a dynasty, and then sanctions wiped out his entire public-facing empire almost overnight because his name was so visible and so connected to political decisions he could not control. The Glazer family bought Manchester United and spent nearly 2 decades being the most publicly hated owners in English football. The money they extracted was significant, but the reputational cost, the protests, the green and gold scarves, the decades of public contempt, none of that would have happened if they had simply bought a portfolio of private companies that nobody had ever heard of. Visibility created targets. Targets attracted consequences. Old money understands that wealth preservation across generations requires something most people find deeply uncomfortable. It requires the willingness to be forgotten, to let other people have the headlines, to sit in rooms where nobody is taking photographs and make decisions that will not appear in any newspaper, to measure success not by recognition but by continuity. The question is never, how famous is this family? The question is always, will this family still have wealth in 100 years? Football clubs do not help answer that question in the right direction. There is also a psychological dimension to this that almost nobody talks about. People who inherit generational wealth are raised inside a specific value system. From childhood, they are taught that discretion is a virtue, that talking about money is vulgar, that the purpose of wealth is not display, but endurance. When you grow up inside that framework, the idea of buying a sports club to impress people does not just seem unnecessary, it seems almost primitive. New money arrives without that framework. It arrives with hunger and urgency and the very human need to be seen. And so it buys the most visible thing available. It puts its name on the most watched stage in the world. It gets the headlines it was never able to get while it was being built. Old money watches all of this and says nothing. It does not criticize. It does not compete. It simply continues doing what it has always done, moving quietly, compounding silently, letting centuries do the work that attention cannot. The families who have held wealth the longest are names you barely recognize. And that is not an accident. That is the strategy. So the next time you see a billionaire buying a football club and announcing it to the world with a press conference and a statement about ambition and investment, understand what you are actually watching. You are watching someone who still needs you to know they made it. Old money already knows, and it stopped caring what you think about 300 years ago.